Hi, everyone. I'm Trish Nettleship, Vice President of Marketing with Brightree. I'd like to thank you for joining us today for our Brightree Coffee Talk, where we'll be discussing empowering remote staff and maintaining productivity in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. The webinar is being recorded, and we will email you a link after the session, so you'll have access to the slides and the audio. If any questions come up throughout this conversation, please enter your questions into the questions pane on the GoToWebinar control panel on your screen. Due to the volume of attendees of this call, we'll follow up with answers to the questions afterwards. I'm excited to welcome my colleague, Liz Brown, our VP of Customer Satisfaction. She's joining us today. Before we get to Liz, though, I've got a lot of things I'm going to cover with you. I'm going to cover some best practices that Brightree's implemented during this time, and Liz will give you some details around the tools you can leverage within Brightree. We're also glad to welcome Heath and Jerri McLamb from Family Medical Supply. They're going to discuss their transition into remote working and some of the best practices they put in place. With that, I'm going to jump right in. I don't know about you guys, but this has been an interesting transition for us here at Brightree. Everyone has transitioned to remote work. We're fully engaged, so we're not going to go back to, making sure you've got the right tools in place. We've all gotten there. We're now working remote. So how do we ensure that we continue to remain productive, engaged, and connected throughout this process? And start to think about what that looks like as we move forward and transition back to the new normal, whatever that looks like. I don't know about you, but for me, with 4 kids at home, this has been quite an interesting transition. So trying to find that place to work and that focused area has been a little bit of a challenge for me. So I'm sure others have been through this as well. I heard from many of my colleagues when we first talked about going remote that already were working remote. A lot of the Brightree team works remote full time. This was going to be no different. They're already doing this. They're well prepared for this. Well, there's some colleagues now have come back and said, yep, this is different. Our spouses are home, our kids are home, we can't go out, we don't have the social interaction. So it's been a new normal for all of us. So how do we ensure that we're engaged and safe? So we have some tips for you today to help be successful during this remote work environment that we're all faced with today. Number 1, practice good self-care. As I mentioned, I have 4 children. I've learned a long time ago, the most important thing is taking care of myself first so I can be there for my kids, my family, and be good and productive in my workplace. That's number 1. How do we do that? We have to establish a clear, focused, and balanced area for us. So we separate professional and the personal life, right? It's hard to do when you're at home. I've taken over the basement. My husband and kids are on the middle floor doing school and their work. It's important that we set those boundaries. I've got a great environment so that I can get up and stretch and walk. That's really important that we take breaks throughout the day. So taking my lunch every day, I go upstairs, I interact with my family, I take the dog for a walk. So I'm making sure that I'm getting those breaks throughout the day. Even to the point where when I was in the office, I worked through lunch. I no longer do that. That's actually something I'm going to take with me when I go back into the office. It's important to take those breaks regardless of whether we're at home or at work. This has just really brought it to the forefront for me. Minimize distractions. It's easy when we're at home with the dog and the kids and the doorbell ringing or whatever's going on in your home to be distracted very easily. Kind of like at work, people stop by your office. We have to do practice the same good behaviors where we can minimize distractions when we really need to focus. That means taking time for mindfulness practices. We need that to energize and clear our mind before we start each work day. When I was going to the office, I commuted every day in and I commuted home. I had that time to prepare from that shift from home to work and work to home. Now I don't have that, so I have to really make that time for mindfulness reflection so I can disconnect from work when I go upstairs to engage with my family and vice versa when I go back down to my work environment. It's really important that we take care of ourselves during this time. And again, I think some of these practices I'm learning I'll be taking forward as I go back into the office. Consider good ergonomics. That's important because, we're maybe not the same environment. I've got a great chair in my office, but at home, I didn't have a great chair. I had to order a new chair, but I'm also having to listen to my body a little bit. If I'm standing for a little bit, I get sore. If I'm sitting for too long, I get sore. I have to move around. I have got multiple places within my home that I can take my laptop and work from. So I've got to make sure that I'm prepared for that, whether it be the right chair, the right desk, so I got the right height for my keyboard. Those things are really important, and sometimes we forget about that as we go from home from the office into our home. Start with trust. And this is really important. We have to trust our people. We have to trust each other, that we're doing the things that we need to do to be productive, even if it's not the way we would have it done in the office. I'm talking to my team. I'm talking to my colleagues on a regular basis. Everybody's situation is different. I have to listen to what's going on with them and be very flexible and allow them the flexibility to navigate this differently, right? Everybody needs something different. I have to trust that they're doing the best things for themselves, and that's got to come first, and for their families and for work. So that's something that we have to really take a leap of faith and give each other grace and trust each other. Very, very important. Be considerate. As folks are navigating work, home, kids, being teachers all of a sudden, we have to be considerate. And that means we allow for differences in schedules, for example. Right? We used to think about time zones and not scheduling meetings over lunches if we could help it. Now it's maybe your colleagues have a time from 10 to 11, they have to help their kids at school. It's understanding what your team and colleagues need and being flexible with that to allow them the time to be there for their families and also being there for work. It means including the right people in the right discussion. So sometimes you don't need everybody to be involved in every decision or every discussion, but sometimes you have to make sure you step back and communicate what the decision was made to the broader team. So being considerate of everyone, whether they're involved in that decision or just need to be informed, right? Be considerate of others. Be prepared. How many meetings have we gotten on since we've all been working remote where the technology didn't work, we couldn't hear each other, someone was muted and started talking? So really be organized and be punctual and be prepared when you start a meeting. Arrive early if it's your meeting. Anticipate technology challenges. They happen even more so now as we're using new technology all the time. And don't assume. Take the time to explicitly agree on what's going to happen during the meeting, after the meeting, and as follow-up. So we're starting to include agendas again. That's something that we've gotten, I'd say, probably gotten a little lazy on. So now that everybody's working from home, it's really important that we manage our discussions and have agendas and be clear on what we're trying to accomplish. So with that kind of leads into retooling your meetings. Ask yourself if you really need a meeting to achieve your goals. Right now, I found myself as I first started working from home to schedule meetings to replace those impromptu conversations that weren't happening because we were all remote. I don't need a meeting to do that, right? I can pick up the phone, I can IM someone, Teams them, whatever. There's other ways to accomplish that goal without actually scheduling meetings. So number one, do you even need the meeting? And then the way we've been doing our meetings lately is we open them very differently. We open with, how are you? Longer discussions, checking in with each other, seeing that we're okay. Really just connecting on a social level before we jump in, which is a little challenge for me. I'm very task-oriented. So taking the time to connect with my colleagues and have those conversations and check in with each other is really important before we jump into the work. We need to continue that engagement and that connection. There's so many tools out there for us to use during meetings. It doesn't always have to be a Zoom meeting. It could be, a Teams meeting. It could be an IM. There's other ways to achieve your goals that aren't necessarily always an in-person or a virtual meeting. So consider all the various platforms out there to use. Be present during meetings. I think this is a challenge for a lot of folks, especially the folks who are working remote. We didn't have, we were all on the phone when we were on Zoom calls. We didn't have our video enabled. Now it's standard practice. Everybody has their video enabled. We're engaged. You're connecting with each other when you see each other at a different level than if you're just listening. Unmute your phone, right? It makes sure if you're unmuted, you're being cognizant of what's happening. You're not multitasking. You're paying attention and really engaging with each other. And part of that, when you're running a meeting, means you've got to facilitate and engage and encourage everyone. It's easy if I'm more of an introvert to be quiet on a virtual call than if I'm in person. So we have to make sure that we're connecting with everyone and helping them understand we value their opinion if it's our meeting to bring them into that. Maintain team camaraderie. This is something my team's had a really good time with. We are marketing, so we like to have a little fun and get creative. We've done a lot of different things. We have a weekly coffee chat where we all just get on the phone, and it's not about work. It's connecting. How was your weekend? How are you dealing with the kids? Did you hear about the latest announcements? We're really just talking about what's happening. That's our replacement for the water cooler, right? This is our virtual replacement for the water cooler. We also have virtual happy hours that we start every other Friday. That's been fun, just a different way to connect. I've also heard of other folks doing virtual lunches. So normally you go sit in the cafeteria and have lunch. Just get on the Zoom and chat and over lunch. It's how do we replace those conversations that we had in the office now that we're virtual to ensure that we're staying connected. Just different ways to do that. And that, again, leads into staying connected. I can't stress this one enough. Consider how you build into your day-to-day those impromptu conversations, right? We're usually together. How do we make those conversations happen virtually? Make an effort to sync up with your team every day. And when I first heard this, I'm like, every day? We're busy. We have meetings. But it makes a world of difference for me to connect with my team, for us to connect with each other and check in. Some folks are living alone. That's a challenge, the loneliness that sets in. How do we keep up with each other and help them to stay, not feel so isolated? Use your Teams group chat. That's a great way. We have our Marketing Mavericks Teams chat that we do. And I've learned about so many movies I need to see and TV series just through this. So we keep it light and fun. And I'm actually starting to do GIFs now, which I never did before. So again, just a fun way to stay connected. Lots of different tools out there that are available to us that we didn't have a chance to test prior to this. We're having a really good time with that. And then finally, stay current. Everybody has different ways of doing this, but ensure you're aware of what's happening with the company, what's happening in the environment outside of you, whether it be your state, your city, the federal government. Ensure that you're staying connected to what's happening so that you can think about what that means for you, your organization, as you prepare for what comes next. We've got a lot of things that are happening right now. Some of these things hopefully will be to take with us in the long term, and some are just learnings for us and figuring out how better to connect with each other day to day. So hopefully these tips helped you think about a couple things you could do differently to stay engaged and think about how you transition from the new normal now to the next new normal that we'll be transitioning to here, hopefully soon. So now let's get to the meat of it. Let's talk to Brad and Jerri and hear about how they are managing the remote work environment. I know there's a lot happening out there. So I want to thank you, first of all, Brad and Jerri, for joining us today. I have a few questions for you. I want to start.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Great, thank you. So I want to start with Brad. Brad, tell me a little about the business model and how it's changed for you guys with COVID-19.
Well, it certainly changed in a hurry from one day when folks were walking in that we were doing CPAP setups in the stores to the next day all our retail stores were locked. We don't want to say closed, but locked. We were doing curbside service. We were out on the curb with a overbed table and a CPAP machine while somebody had basically drive-through setups, and we kept social distancing. If anybody had the flu and they needed a nebulizer and they were considered to be potential for COVID, we were setting the nebulizer down in the parking lot 6 feet away from the car, and then they were coming to get it after the fact. And folks were extremely courteous and have continued to be extremely courteous about that. Everybody has taken this seriously. But all your processes for patient engagement had to be written basically within about a 48-hour period in how we were interacting with these folks. And it really has put a lot of emphasis on follow-up, on checking in with them the next day and 2 days later to make sure that everything's working like it should be. And I think a lot of those are things that when this is over won't go away from the follow-up perspective. But certainly those are the big things in the patient engagement side. Sending employees home. Our home office has probably 140 employees or so, and 90% of those are home at this point. That didn't happen all at once. That was over a couple of 10 days or so as you get phones that have to be adapted to home and integrated within our system from their home, folks getting their home offices set up. But that has worked out well. We had already built a lot of tracking into place with our phone calls, with Brightree tasks, with notes and things like that. That has certainly become more valuable than ever in seeing productivity.
Great. Sounds like you guys have learned a lot really quickly. So another question, I think this is for Jerri. How have you found in the Brightree system this has made this easier for you?
Well, as Brad said, the task revenue cycle, the work list, the sales order work list, your being able to post your ERNs, all of that stuff. Brightree's always made it easy to be remote. So it was easier to assign tasks to different employees. It's also, having the ability to send tasks back and forth, and then of course emailing back the community. community through Brightree, having the coronavirus resource center. I know that I've had a lot of communication with different suppliers on what they're doing during this time, and we're all asking those same questions. What's going to happen when we try to submit our oxygen CMM? How are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? And then seeing some of the other suppliers doing what we're doing, the curbside service, the mailing off the CPAPs, and doing the remote setups. So there's a lot of things that have worked out. Some of the data stuff we're doing right now is great with the infectious control, having that ability to see that immediately when we pull up a patient, and the new things that y'all are putting in place for us to use Brightree. It's great.
Great, thanks, Jerri. So what other adjustments have you made to your business during this time? Either one.
Well, for those that are working, every morning before we let them walk in the door, we're doing temperature checks. So, that's a little harder in your day, getting here, and the managers that are here, we all have a schedule of who's doing the temperature checks at what time, and so we check the temperature, and when you have somebody that's on that borderline temperature, you say, okay, step back over there. We're going to check it again in a few minutes. And we haven't had anybody with had to send home. We've had a few cold mornings where employees have run their heat, and the heat's been blowing in their face to where we have to use a different thermometer to get their temperatures checked. So that's been a change for us. And then trying to keep connected with everybody. As you said earlier, touching base with everybody that's working at home, and making sure that they are getting by okay, if they're struggling with anything, and just trying to motivate people when you don't see them is something that's been a challenge for me.
We have also, with our retail floors not open for retail, we've taken some of our CSRs that would handle that type of business or be involved there and retrain them for some key-ins. We've had some offshore positions that we have moved back during this time, just trying to really make sure that we're taking care of our people, and it has given us the opportunity to catch up on some things. We've had good growth, and that's been a blessing, but really reallocating and moving resources around, training folks to do new things so that you can catch up anywhere that may have been behind as you walked into this.
Sounds like you guys are making the best of maybe not the best situation. So that's great to hear. What are some of your biggest surprises from COVID-19?
Medicare relaxing LCDs. I mean, the rate of it happening, and the people that are getting sick, and the changes in our social distancing and all of that was definitely it's very surprising. It's very nerve-wracking. It's very it's heartbreaking to see the numbers and all. But as far as in our business, I think Medicare and CMS changing policy so quickly. Of course, the bad thing is that we still don't know how we're going to get paid for this stuff. They're relaxing all this stuff, but none of the carriers know how to process claims. So we're still hanging out kind of on that tightrope, not knowing what we're going to do. So I think that's the biggest thing that I've had, and trying to get used to the new norm. And riding through your town, and it seems like it's a ghost town because there's nobody out and about. I mean, there's nobody on the road and stuff. So that's been my biggest surprise.
I think my biggest surprise was Jerri's face the day that all the CMM requirements, the LCDs got relaxed on Medicare. That was 28 years of learning unwound in a matter of hours there. That was the biggest surprise of this whole experience. But communities have come together, industries have come together. There's a lot of folks that are out of work, and that is a riddle we have to solve. But the folks that are still needed, just the creativity and the adaptation that folks have used to continue to work has been a wonderful surprise in the midst of a very difficult time. You know, that folks have really embraced each other more in other ways. And this industry as a whole, the ability to call one another and depend upon one another for best practices, for finding PPE, has just been one of the most endearing things of this whole experience.
I couldn't agree with you more. So finally, one last question for you guys. Have you started thinking about what the return to work could look like? I mean, we've had a couple of states this week announce, you know, they're going to be opening back up. So have you guys started to think about what that looks like?
I don't think that we really have at this point. You know, we've had folks that started out working here and we found a way to get them home. I think we've had one that we found it was better for them to work here, and we've gotten enough folks out. So you kind of adjust to that. I think for us, it's really about the patient. How do we adjust on the patient-facing side to make that more normal again? But you know, we serve the most susceptible folks, so you're not in a rush there. It's really, we want to protect our people. We have to protect our people, but we're also wanting to protect the patients. So when we have a 23-year-old technician going into the home of a 78-year-old COPD patient, they're wearing that mask to protect the patient more than they are themselves. The patient doesn't see folks as it is. So if they're homebound, so those are things that we say, hey, we want to see businesses get open. We want folks' livelihoods to work out, but we really are in a new norm right now until we know that folks are not at risk, at least for our part of the industry.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you both. We really appreciate you being on with us today. Now I'm going to turn it over to Liz to discuss some of the tools in Brightree that providers can use to find critical at this time.
Thank you, Trish. Brightree Community, as a lot of you know, is a place where you can connect with peers, find resources that help you do what you do best. We've talked about the COVID-19 discussion group, and Jerry just mentioned it also, but we want to mention it again because this is a forum where you can really ask questions and get answers from other providers that are also experiencing the same thing. You'll notice in the highlighted block, we've compiled some quick start resources specifically around making sure you can get your system set up for working remotely, including the browser best practices, user setup, and configuring IP to maintain your secure networks. I also want to highlight there's a getting started quick page on the right. Community has a lot to offer, including not only knowledge articles, training, and live chat support, but if you're just getting acclimated, we encourage you to look at the link below, brightree.com/community, and you can log in using your normal Brightree credentials and then take a look at the new user guide to get started. At a time where teams are really used to working verbally across the office and communicating in person, digital productivity and task management tools really allow you to work remotely without losing that part of the organization. So the Brightree work lists allow the supervisors to keep an eye on the work that's coming in and for employees to know what's next on their plate. We have several of them in the system, and there's just a few listed here. The document management work list, sales order work list, revenue cycle work list, pharmacy work list for our pharmacy infusion customers, and the POD work list for our mobile delivery customers. While delivering patient equipment is critical, we do have some functionality in Brightree to help you stay safe while you're doing it. One of those is the dropship function within e-purchasing that enables customers using VGM fulfillment to dropship serialized items to patients. In addition, we've developed a utility that you can help automate the process of adding the serialized items into Brightree inventory. Another piece is the Brightree mobile delivery module. Not only does mobile delivery allow you to streamline your deliveries, but it gives you more options to keep your patient and employees safe with contactless delivery options. Recently announced, the ability to capture photos in place of e-signatures allows you to capture delivery confirmation when a signature is not feasible. Now, more than ever, an at-a-glance look at your business is critical. An option we've unveiled recently is the COVID-19 Business Analytics Dashboard with 4 different reports designed to help you keep moving forward. We've sent a message to your executive team regarding getting these set up for your business and providing some additional information on these next week. Also available in Brightree's core platform is ad hoc reporting. That includes the employee productivity report. If you haven't already set this up, there's resources available in Brightree community to help you to get this done. We'll also be sending a link out in the follow-up to this webinar.
Great, thank you, Liz. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining the webinar today. As a reminder, a link to the webinar recording will be sent to your inbox tomorrow, and you'll be able to review the presentation again. We'll also post this in community, as we've talked about several times. And a reminder that the community COVID-19 discussion group is available for your peer questions you have. Don't forget to go out there and engage with your peers to learn more. Thanks for attending. Have a great day.